Hello everyone, welcome to Foundry Live, the preview of Mari 5.0 and Katana 5.0, and thank you for joining. My name is Elise and I am part of Foundry's industry marketing team, and today it's my pleasure to introduce my colleagues Rory Woodford, Charlie Holt, Ariel Martin, and Gary Jones. Together they are part of Foundry's Look Development Lighting team and they will be presenting today's webinar. After their presentation, there will be a live Q&A, so if you have any questions, please add them into the questions tab on the right-hand side of your screen. And there you'll also see the chat tab, so feel free to say hello and let us know where you're joining from. Before I pass it over, there are a few things that I'd like to mention. First of all, today's webinar is part of the Foundry Live event series, and over the next 2 weeks, we'll be sharing product updates, previews of upcoming releases, and the latest innovations from Foundry. Here's a look at our upcoming Foundry Live schedule. And if you'd like to register for another event, we'll share the link to our live storm page in the chat. I see Jen does that, so yeah, you guys can register for more upcoming events there. And Foundry Live is sponsored by our partners, Dell and NVIDIA, and I would like to thank them for not only being supportive of Foundry Live, but for working closely with Foundry to test and optimize our software with their products. As part of their sponsorship, we're excited to give away RTX Quadro 5000 and other special prizes, including Foundry licenses and swag. The winners will be announced on October 1st, so please stay tuned. And thank you again to Dell and NVIDIA. So throughout the month of September, and as part of Foundry Live, we are celebrating Foundry's 25th anniversary. Foundry began in 1996 with Nuke and expanded into lighting with Katana in 2009, and 3D texture painting with Mari in 2010. In 2013, Katana won the Academy SciTech Awards, and Mari followed in 2016. These are a few of Foundry's many highlights over the year, and if you're interested in learning more, you can check out Foundry's 25 years on our dedicated webpage. While you're on our website, I'd also like to encourage you to stay up to date with Foundry by checking out our Insights Hub, where you can find articles and case studies, follow Foundry on social media, and subscribe to our quarterly newsletter. Also, if you're interested in attending more virtual events, we're hosting a webinar on October 7th with Sony Picture Imageworks to talk about laying the groundwork for success with Katana, and we'll be participating in other industry events like View Conference, Spark Animation, Real-Time Conference, and more. So if you plan on attending those, be on the lookout for Foundry sessions. Also, I'd like to take this opportunity to mention Foundry Learn. On Foundry Learn, you can find many great tutorials for Katana and Mari, as well as developer documentation, release notes, and more. We recently added new tutorials, and we'll share a link to the Learn page in the chat so you can check those out as well. And for those of you who may be interested in joining Foundry's Look Development and Lighting team, it's expanding, and we're currently looking for an engineer manager and software engineer. If you're interested in learning more about the available positions, please visit foundry.com/careers. And finally, I'd like to thank the studios, artists, and partners I've participated in and supported Foundry's virtual event series so far this year, and to thank everyone for attending today's session. So without further ado, we'll move on to the main event. The next part has been pre-recorded for streaming quality purposes, but we'll be here with you live in the chat, and we'll come back for live Q&A. I hope that you enjoyed today's webinar, and stay tuned for more to come.
Hello everybody, and welcome to Look Dev and Lighting's preview of Mari and Katana 5 for Foundry Live, September 2021. Let's start our presentation off with the Look Dev team and talk about where we're going with Mari. After focusing the last 3 major releases of Mari around our new material system, we felt that it was in a great shape with the release of 4.7 last year. Therefore, in 2021, we plan to go in a fresh direction. To start, we've been doing our part to align with the VFX reference platform and finally upgrade Mari to Python 3. It's been a long journey that we started in the middle of last year, which is why it's the 2020 reference platform that we are targeting rather than 2021. However, due to this, we have made the decision to upgrade OpenColor.io to version 2.0, as specified in the 2021 targeted reference platform, which is also in line with Nuke 13.1's plans. Additionally, we have changed direction on Mari 4.8's platform. We were originally planning for 4.8 to be a continuation of the 2017 reference platform that all of the 4 series have been built on so far. However, after upgrading our entire build system for Mari 5, we discovered that we could also compile a Python 2 target of Mari 5's codebase. So that is what Mari 4.8 is going to become, a Python 2 version of Mari 5 with all the same brand new features. A lot of these platform decisions have been driven by our key mission this year, to reduce the pipeline friction between Mari and Katana. The emergence of USD in the industry has given us the opportunity to do just that, but more on this later. Besides USD interop with Katana, we also focused our efforts on two incredible new enhancements in Mari 5, brush color dynamics and bake point filters, both of which I shall demonstrate in a minute. But before we talk about Mari 5, I wanted to touch base on our other goal this year, which was to use any spare engineering effort available outside our main three features to further enhance the artist's day-to-day quality of life within Mari by polishing existing workflows. We delivered some of these quality of life improvements earlier this year with Mari 4.7 v4. Our main focus of attack was demystifying some of the areas of our color management system. Ever since we introduced our perceptual color picking engine, artists have reached out to us in an attempt to clarify how to choose raw RGB values in the picker for non-color channels like displacement, roughness, or index of refraction. To make this simpler, we introduced a scalar mode to our color picker. This mode disables our perceptual color picking engine and allows artists to simply choose the RGB values that they need for their data channels, without us running the RGB components as a color through OpenColor IO. However, we are aware that this new mode is also causing some issues with the eyedropper tool when in scalar picking mode. This is certainly something that we are targeting to address in the 4.7 maintenance soon. Through our continued collaboration with Weta, we were able to bring artists new color space context conversion filters. These are really handy if you want to integrate the mid-gray of your bump map into your color channel or use part of your color channel within a mask stack. Using these adjustment layers will ensure that texture data is correctly converted to the color space context of your target layer stack. Mari supports two view transform modes for correctly viewing the canvas in a color or scalar context. This is usually driven by the color space configuration of a downstream node, like a channel, shader input, material output, or bakepoint node. For scenarios where there are none of these nodes downstream, artists now have two new nodes, View as Color and View as Scalar, that override the viewing context, allowing artists to visually debug how their paint data will look in either color space context. Besides all the color management work, we also spent some time addressing other areas of Mari. One notable fix was that of a performance regression introduced in the 4 series, where any minor tweak of the layer stack or node graph would invoke the dreaded spinning wheel, caused by shader compilation caching not being utilized. Artists should now see similar performance to Mari's 3 series while working on a project. If you haven't upgraded to the latest Mari version because of performance concerns, we really hope that you try the latest 4.7 release today. Okay, so that covers where we've been. Now let me dive into what you should expect to see in the upcoming Mari 5. To start, Mari 5 brings a lot of added value to artists with enhancements, polish, and performance upgrades. We've introduced 5 new procedural patterns for layers and nodes to allow artists to create gradient ramp type effects. The distance and facing gradients, based on object position and camera perspective, were already integrated into the mask's output of the object and camera projection procedurals we added in Mari 4.6. However, they were not straightforward to extract or available for layer stack artists. So we made self-contained versions of them with some extra parameters for fine-tuning that everyone can access. My favorite new procedural is the 2-point gradient that generates either a linear or radial gradient between 2 locator positions in your Mari project. Artists should be able to make more precise soft area driven masks with these new procedurals than ever before. Ever since Mari added the node graph, we have been receiving a common request that we are finally delivering in Mari 5, grid snapping in the node graph. With user controls for grid cell color, width and height, Mari artists can now customize the layout experience of their complex node networks with precision and ease. Through our collaboration with Weta, we have been able to bring Mari artists some great optimizations. Our mechanism for cleaning up old paint and cache data has seen an improvement to help reduce the size of your project data footprint. And more impressively, by taking advantage of modern OpenGL features, Mari shader flattening speeds have seen great improvements when converting procedural layers to paint or flattening a node network to a bake point. Like with this example, where converting a tile layer to a paintable across 128 4K UDIMs at 16 bits, depending on your hardware and software configuration, can now take up to 50% less time than ever before. Artists working in Mari 5 can experience an unprecedented level of precision and creative control thanks to our newly introduced dynamic color controls to the brush engine. Artists are able to adjust the color effect for each spot of their chosen brush tip as you paint a stroke across the canvas. Meanwhile, the much requested hue, saturation, value brush jittering feature has been added, with the ability to precisely adjust the range of each of these effects together or in isolation. Each new jittering effect can be configured to either change color on a per tip or per stroke event, allowing artists to create more stylistic brush strokes than has ever been possible before. Mari 5's enhanced brush engine also includes improvements to generating file-driven brush tips. Artists can now specify whether a brush tip's alpha is generated from an image's red, green, blue, alpha, or luminance channels, or the ability to utilize the full RGBA color data from an image file, including color space controls, which enable artists to splat decal images as their brush tips. Combined with the new color jittering function, really unlocks the possibilities on what you can paint with Mari 5. All of Mari's procedural patterns and filters are powered by GLSL, which produces high frame rates for 3D effects. However, 2D effects that need to look at neighboring texels like height is normal for displaying bump maps, blurs, or edge detection filters can drastically hit frame rates to a standstill, which is why some of these effects were only available as offline filters that artists could only apply to a paint layer. As converting node networks to flattened paint was such a destructive workflow just to apply a blur filter, most artists turned to Nuke to generate new masks from mesh maps non-destructively. Like this example of converting the extracted Z displacement map from ZBrush into an edge mask of all the creature scales. See how this recipe of nodes runs the depth data through edge detect and blur nodes to get to the final mask. Now with bakepoint filters, the same recipe can be achieved in Mari. Artists can chain multiple bakepoints with filters or stack multiple filters on a single bakepoint to reduce the project data footprint. The filtered image set data lives alongside the baked result of the upstream network so that filters can be edited and experimented with live without having to rebake the bakepoint to make filter parameter changes. Additionally, whenever the upstream network has changed, Mari's various batch bakepoint updating mechanisms will now also reapply the configured filter stack to the updated baked result without interrupting your artistic flow. Combining the existing bakepoint features of limited patch range baking and the synchronization of baked results to geochannels, the addition of filters advanced the versatility of bakepoints more than ever, truly making no-graph texturing one of Mari's most empowering features for texture artists. Finally, I'd like to talk about our key goal this year, which was to reduce pipeline friction between Mari and Katana by introducing interop workflows that leverage Pixar's USD format. To start Mari's USD journey, we launched a Mesh Importer plugin on an open source repository alongside Mari 4.6 v4 last year, but this required studios to build the plugin themselves before it could be integrated into Mari. Thanks to the upgrades from the 2020 VFX reference platform, Mari 5 will ship with these plugins so that they are available to everyone out the box, and for studios wanting to customize their USD experience, the bundle plugin can be easily disabled with a preference to swap in a custom build in its place. With various digital content creators integrating Pixar's hydra viewport technology like Katana, VFX and animation artists are able to enrich their shop production viewport experience by shading their assets with a physically based USD preview surface. Mari 5 ships with the first phase of a USD-driven workflow, where this first iteration will enable artists to author flattened preview looks for assets textured in Mari. To support this workflow, we've introduced the USD preview surface into Mari as a new shader. This will allow artists to develop a preview look alongside your project's primary render engine shaders. Authoring preview looks in Mari 5 is just the beginning of our USD journey, as we are currently designing far more extensive workflows for your look development pipelines. For some assets, like props and environments, signing off as look development with Mari's approximation shaders is sometimes all that is required for the show. So when the texture maps exported from Mari are sent to a shading artist, all they would do is plug the maps directly into the relative BXDF shader and assign it to the same model file the Mari artist had originally created their project with. With the introduction of the USD shade standard, this step of the shading process can be completely automated and performed at export time within Mari. Next year and beyond, we are planning to extend our USD look exporter to support vendor shader contexts alongside the preview surface, so that a complete and final USD material can be generated from within the Mari project. We also want to enable artists to use Mari selection group tools to drive sub-mesh location and facet-based material assignments. with the vision that all your look development of flattened texture-driven shading networks can be completely authored within Mari. And that's a look at what's coming up in Mari 5 later this year. Let us now move over to look development in Katana with Charlie, who will talk you through some of the great updates she and the team have been working on.
Thanks, Rory. We have some exciting new features to shout about in Katana today, and I hope you'll all stick around to hear Ariel and Gary walk you through them. Outside of these new features, I'd like to talk about an area that I feel particularly passionate about, where sometimes the seemingly smallest changes can have a huge impact on our daily artist lives. Here in the LD&L team, we like to refer to this as the quality of life. A focus on fixing those workflow niggles and strains that, whilst not immediately an issue, can really add up and slow down the efficiency of our day. If you caught our Foundry Live presentation earlier on in the year, you'll know that we have some big ideas of the steps we see Katana's Look Dev toolset taking in the future. Since Katana 3.0, we've always intended for the network materials to be a multi-phased rollout, but we also recognise that the network material space wasn't quite where it could be at present. With that in mind, I'm really happy to introduce some of the changes that we've been making to elevate Katana look development with improving your artist experience at the forefront of our decisions. As a material designer, we know that being able to reuse areas of shaders between you and your colleagues is vital. Whilst we continue our journey towards live shading groups, Katana 5.0 takes a giant step in that direction by welcoming macros to our network material space. Users will notice that these macros work in exactly the same way as they've come to expect in the root node graph, meaning that you can now create and share materials or sections of your shader network between projects, users, and shows with ease. We've also added user parameter support to shading groups, allowing you to drive contained parameters with expressions from the top level for a more finite control of your material. We understand that Katana hasn't always been the easiest to learn. With Katana 5.0, we aim to simplify the learning curve of material creation by working towards a goal of what I'm seeing should be what I'm getting. We know that look development in Katana isn't always about handing over materials to your lighting artists. For the cases where we have new users or even texture artists coming into Katana to do look development for their dailies, we want to ensure that the network material process is as straightforward as possible for artists to create and reuse material shading groups. With that in mind, we've started investigating ways we can ensure that the material is accurately represented throughout the shader graph. As I mentioned before, what we see should be what we get. One issue we encountered in previous versions was that the order of exposed parameters on a shading group wasn't respected through to the parent network material create. In Katana 5, ancestral nodes will inherit exposed parameter order from their child shading groups, meaning that you can now reorder parameters at any point in your graph and have these intuitively respected up to the parent group. You can also rename public interface parameters from the shading group to help avoid potential naming conflicts in the network material edit. Conflicts can now easily be resolved without needing to dive inside the inner shading groups, reducing the time wasted individually renaming exposed parameters and making it easy to detect and resolve network errors. We also want to continue to introduce functionality from the root node graph into the network material space. One of your most highly requested features being the teleport node. We observed that with a large number of studios, this was being used to manage the organization of the network. In Katana 5, we aim to tackle this first part of the teleport functionality by giving you the ability to hide the input connections of any node with a simple, user-friendly shortcut, so that you can easily remove visual clutter from complex networks. Katana 5 also delivers a range of updates to the network material interface that aim to streamline shader network creation and hand more power to the artist to customize how you work. To start with, our dot nodes are smaller, neater, and are now omnidirectional. They enforce straight edge connections for creating clean network templates that flow in any direction. We've also added a handy UI toggle for quickly switching your node's view state. And for when those nodes are collapsed, making connections between shading nodes has never been easier. Previously, making a connection could be a lengthy endeavour, with the need to switch between the node's view state often adding excessive clicks to the process. With Katana's new intuitive port filtering, minimized nodes will now auto-expand on cursor hover to show only the relevant ports based on the type of connection that you're making, turning a 4 or 5 click process into one swift movement. Beyond this, we've also tried to reduce the footprint of our nodes where possible by removing duplicate information and adding shortcuts or preferences to customize the node graph to your personal taste. You can see these changes both in the shorter node footers within the Network Material Crate and Network Material Edit, and also in the new default connected-only view state. In this new state, page headers have been removed to reduce the visual clutter and to keep only the essential details in the node UI. Whilst pages are removed by default, for those artists who prefer to have all of the information on screen, a new preference has been added to globally re-enable pages on all nodes that are in the connected-only state. In fact, wherever we can, we've handed the interface over to the artist, empowering you to make your own creative decisions with all of this and more in Katana 5. So that's all we have tonight from LookDev. We have so much more to share with you on the lighting side still to come. I'm going to hand you over to the lighting team to talk about some of the incredible work that they've been doing for Katana 5, including a look at the highly anticipated Nuke interop. Over to you, Ariel.
Thank you, Charlie. So before we get to that, I'll go over some of the work we've been doing with USD and Hydra. And we began with updating our USD libraries from version 1911 to 2105. In order to achieve this, we've upgraded our VFX reference platform to 2020, which then enabled us to move a lot forwards. And so that's what I'll be showing you today. I'll start by touching on our history within that space. So previous to 2019, we were basically laying down the technical foundations for Katana. And then through to 2018, we were preparing the groundwork for the adoption of Hydra for our viewport. And at that point, we were the first CCC to ship with a Hydra-based viewport. So being a look, dev, and lighting tool, in the past, Katana has sat at the end of the pipeline chain. But now there's a need to work in a non-linear way and to preview things such as look dev as early as the layout, animation, or other stages, if you want to view your assets in context before validating or signing off your work. So there's now a need to round trip, and we are committed to making that happen. As of Katana 4.0, we introduced the USD material bake node, which uses the look file bake workflow we've had at the heart of Katana for a while. This is all available in a public repository as of Katana 4.0, and it enables us to export materials from Katana. We've seen today from Rory's presentation how material information can come out of Mari in the form of USD. So here we have Mari on the left, Katana on the right, and at the click of a button you can now export and package your assets with USD and then bring them into Katana. From which point we could then pick up these materials in our material editing context and make further changes, and then even push them back up the pipeline if we want to. So there are some very exciting possibilities there. What we've done for the upcoming release following the upgrade to USD 2105 is built on top of what we've already done. At this point, with Katana being a look, dev, and lighting tool, a missing piece of the puzzle was to bring light information in and out of Katana. And we can now do that through USD Lux, as we've expanded on our USD export tools to also support lights as well. So you can now author lights in Katana to then export them using our shader registry and then bring them back in. And once your lights have come back into Katana, it'll then be possible to pick them up in a Gaffer 3 node to make further changes as well. And this will all be open source in the USD plugins repository, so you can pick it up and build on it. We're using a new custom schema as well to enable functionalities such as exporting multiple light shaders on a single prim. And this all just makes for a very smooth and easy round trip, since USD Lux is very much a moving target at the moment. So in the future, this custom schema will be superseded by improvements in the USD Lux space, and then we'll be able to take a more universal approach. And so this is the very exciting work we've been doing around USD Lux. It means we can now set up both your materials and lights in Katana and then push that back up in the pipeline. And all of this is about removing that pipeline friction and being able to work seamlessly between departments. And this isn't all. We've made changes to our Hydra viewport, so we now fully support custom render delegates. With new options specifically for this purpose, you can now switch between delegates in order to preview in the Hydra viewer your materials and lights within that context. Some of our pre-existing options, such as enabling and disabling materials or lights, are still available, and we can see that switching to a custom delegate will respect those as well. And so this will be very much plug and play, since many of our render partners will be shipping a Hydra delegate within their plugins for Katana. And as you can see, switching to another delegate is very smooth and interactive. When enabling materials, by default, these will pick up USD preview surface materials and USD Lux lights, unless the render specific material is present in the scene, in which case those will be used. There are options to pause or stop the delegates at any given time. Whether the delegates support one options versus the other or both of them is down to them. But it's all about gaining interactivity as you're working on your scenes. So you can free up your machine whilst you make changes, whilst you work and iterate on your scenes. And then once you're ready, you can resume the delegate. And this works across the different delegates that supports this feature. The delegate settings can be found within the display options at the top as well, so we can modify the settings for that delegate directly here. There are selection options, so you can choose how the elements are highlighted when selected inside the viewer. And there are also options for previewing purposes. That's if the USD document includes information relating to purposes, then you can be selective as to what you're previewing and untick the elements that you don't want to be seeing in the viewer. And so these are the really exciting things that are happening in our Hydra viewer, and we can't wait for you to give it a go, especially because one of the delegates available is our very own AVP, the Advanced Viewport. And this will be shipped with Katana, and it's the technology behind Modo and Mari. So we're very excited to have this integrated into Katana as a delegate. This is a GL renderer and includes features such as ambient occlusion, better shadows, transparencies, reflection. So it's all about having a better representation inside the viewer, a better experience when placing lights and authoring materials. So you can really harness the power of previewing your scenes at a really high quality. And this opens up a whole range of possibilities in the future. Whilst we're still on the topic of the Hydra viewer, I am very excited to show you another feature, which is around the topic of instancing. We can now view instances in the viewport. This will work with the various types of instances and functionalities that exist around that in Katana. How they are viewed isn't too different from how other elements are shown in the viewport. So you can selectively view the instances you need by just expanding them in the scene graph. If it contains bounding box information, you can also preview them as bounding boxes, so you can still get an idea of where they are inside the scene. This also supports nested instancing, so instances that are embedded within instances can also be previewed accurately in the viewport. So this is extremely useful, especially when we're working on scenes with lots of instances. We'll now be able to preview them without setting off the render. So we're very excited with where this can take us, since it paves the way for much more in the future. That's all there is from me, but it's not all the updates from the lighting team. So I'll now pass over to Gary, who is going to go over some of the work he's been pioneering with Nuke interop. So without further ado, over to you, Gary.
Now, I'd like to talk about two exciting features in Katana 5. Those of you following us on social media may have recently seen a teaser for one of those features, but before I get to that, let me talk about the next step in our Foresight rendering system. Just to recap for those of you who don't know, Foresight is our name for two unique abilities of Katana. The first is the ability to have multiple renders going at the same time, streaming pixels back to the interface. The other ability is for you to have those renders take place either on your personal machine, those on your immediate network, your render farm, and potentially even the cloud. This opened up a host of powerful options when combined with our extremely flexible shot and sequence-based workflows and the tools that enable you to iterate quickly and with confidence, like interactive render filters and render working sets. Artists were empowered to be more productive and creative than ever before. But Foresight, as it shipped in Katana 4.0, was designed with preview rendering in mind, and this was down to the way the underlying architecture works. We did ship with the ability to use it with live rendering, but because what was communicated through the live rendering system was just attribute changes, certain evaluations could result in an inaccurate picture. That's why we had live rendering through Foresight behind an environment variable and a warning about its limitations. What we've done for Katana 5.0 is completely changed the way the system works and how changes are communicated to the render process. Now you can start a live render on multiple shots at the same time, iterate on those shots that are running anywhere on your network, confident that what you are seeing is the correct picture in every render. This new rendering system we are calling Foresight Plus. Firstly, I'd like to show you some of the artist workflow aids we've built with Foresight Plus, and then bring it all together for you in a quick lighting example. Let's start with a single render and take a look at the Catalog tab. What you'll see is a number of the columns associated with graph state variables in the project, and they are all here with a new checkbox next to them. This is a new pinning feature that we've introduced. If you don't see your graph state variables in columns, you can add them by right-clicking on the column headers section of the Catalog tab. So what does this new pinning feature do? With everything pinned, when I make any changes to the graph state variables or the current frame, the live render doesn't update, totally ignores the changes, and it doesn't interrupt any renders that are taking place. The reason this is super useful becomes more apparent later on. Of course, there might be situations where you want to make changes to the live render through graph state changes, and that's just a click away. Here you can see I am cycling through the t-shirt that our hero is using by hooking into the USD variant attached to the character. But if I change the shot variable, the render totally ignores it, while the viewer and the scene graph tabs update to match the new value. To make this all work seamlessly, we've also introduced an addition to our expression syntax. Instead of taking the graph state variable from the project settings, which are just parameters on the root node, you can now get them from the context in which they are being rendered. Full details of this will be available in the documentation, but it's worth noting we aren't taking away the old system, and if you aren't using the new Foresight Plus feature, then you can carry on with what you have, just business as usual. The eagle-eyed Katana veterans amongst you may have noticed something else that is new in the Catalog tab, and that's the Sync to Project Settings checkbox at the top. For this one, let's have a look at 3 shots rendering at the same time. Each one has a different shot value and frame number. You'll see as I click between them in the catalogue, nothing changes in the viewer, the timeline, or the graph state variables list at the top. Now, when I turn on the new Sync to Project Settings option, as I click around the catalogue entries, all these tabs update to match. This speeds up your ability to maneuver between shots and stay in the artistic flow. On the surface, these things might seem like small changes, but now let's bring it all together and do a quick lighting addition to a sequence with that example I promised you earlier. Here we have 6 shots rendering at the same time. While I like the main key and the overall light through the window, with everything being lit that way, I think we need a foreground fill to help make everything pop a little more and to stop some of the characters being difficult to read. So let's turn on Sync to Project Settings and go to work. You'll notice immediately that the interface switches to match the current foreground catalogue entry, and we're ready to go. Taking advantage of the lighting tools from Katana 4.0, we quickly create and place the light where we want it, and with a quick double tap of the backtick key, we're back to looking through the render camera and tweaking the light values to dial in the exposure we like. When we're fairly happy with the first pass, we can have a look around at the other shots in the sequence and see if anything needs tweaking. I'm not a big fan of seeing the light in the TV screen. There's a couple of ways to stop this, but I decide to go with a quick light linking solution using the image-based selection tools. And there you go. This was all done in seconds on one machine, so imagine what you could do with the power of a farm. Foresight Plus really puts incredible power in the hands of the lighting artist to iterate quickly across as many shots as they want, while never dropping out of that creative flow. Next, I'm going to talk about something that has been eagerly anticipated, probably since Katana was first acquired by Foundry from Sony oh so many years ago, and it's the first step in bridging the gap between lighting and comp, Katana and Nuke, through a new Nuke interop framework. Those of you that joined us earlier in the year for other events saw an early proof of concept of this, where we demoed sending pixels to Nuke, through the comp and then back to Katana. Since then, we've rebuilt this proof of concept on top of the same framework that the Foresight Plus system is using, and started plumbing in some new features. Now, I can't show you everything that we're planning to deliver in the Katana 5 timeline, but I can start to tease you with some of the early possibilities, and then talk you through what's coming next. In the demo we showed at other events, you had to have Nuke open and you could only stream a single render at a time. Let's first take a look at a very simple example using our scene from earlier. Here we're just sending a beauty pass to Nuke, running it through a couple of nodes in Nuke and viewing it inside Katana. This is just a preview comp and not a live version. Note that I've not even opened Nuke to have this comp take place. This is an extremely simple example, but what about sending multiple shots? Here's the 6 shots I was rendering earlier. The Nuke script has multiple entry points that allow for the user to see everything they need in a contact sheet UI, including additional data that is being fed by the Nuke script. But in later versions, this could be fed by metadata that is coming from Katana. Down the road, we'd also like to provide a single button that would allow you to make a daily from within Katana. No more sleepless nights wondering whether you have everything ready for your next conversation with the lighting, CG or VFX supervisor. Multiple shots isn't the only time you might want to send lots of renders to Nuke. What about multiple passes? Here we have one of the early shots that I've been iterating over, and while I finished some of the passes earlier, I was adding a rim light to one of the characters in its own pass to provide a little more separation. At the click of a button, I can double check what the whole composition looks like in the context of the shot. Now, this is just a couple of simple examples that I can demonstrate with only the ability to send beauty passes and use Nuke in a preview comp mode, but that isn't all we have in mind for this first iteration. You'll have the choice to have Nuke open or headless, run preview comps or have a live session with data streaming back and forth, and to send multiple AOVs all at the same time. To keep on top of these exciting developments as well as many others across our suite of products, make sure to sign up to Foundry updates on your preferred social media channel. The goal of these 2 features and everything that you've seen today is to help artists work smarter and with less frustration by providing innovative but simple to use artistic tools and reducing the difficulty of moving between departments or applications by reducing pipeline friction. If you'd like to see some more examples of how Nuke are tackling these same problems, I highly recommend that you sign up for tomorrow's exciting updates. I'd love to hear which features are getting you the most excited from the presentation today, and what workflows would you like to see next from the closer relationship between Mari, Katana and Nuke. There's some poll questions available in the side tab for you to give us your thoughts. And on that note, thanks for listening to our presentation. Hi everyone, I hope there was something there for all of you and I hope you all enjoyed the presentation. This is the Q&A part of the presentation, so if you have any questions, there's a questions tab to the side of the chat, and we look forward to answering them, and I hope there was plenty there for you to get excited about.
Yeah, I see one directed at me from Jens. I'll take the opportunity to answer straight up. So Jens asked me about the brush dynamics that we showed in Mari 5 and whether or not we plan to have arrays to support multiple brush tips that we switch between each other. The simple answer is yes. I just wish I had had time to put into Mari 5. So what we're going to do is support brush tip atlases. So essentially multiple brush tip images in an atlas map in a grid shape that you just, in the brush settings, you define amount of columns, amount of rows, much like our random atlas node that we have in Mari, similar sort of system. So essentially we just build in controls where you can kind of define how much of each of those cells you would jitter between, and then yes, you would have that same effect, but with jittering the full image as well. Future version of Mari, not sure when it'll land yet, but it has already been discussed internally. Just didn't have time to fully realize it for this release.
Hi, David. Got a question here about the release dates for when we're likely to be releasing this. I think you'll find that they're both going to be released in Q4 this year. Exact dates are still to be determined, but you'll be able to get your hands on them sometime before the end of the year. Let me see if we've got something else. Looks like we've answered a lot of the questions in the questions tab already.
I'll pick out a question here from Eric for you guys to answer about the hydra delegates.
Hello. Yes. So how does the viewer delegate differ from the monitor overlay feature? Excuse me. Sorry, the screen is very, very small in the corner. Yes. So the difference here is that render delegates will go through Hydra's API. So there may be a few features missing there and there from the native render itself, but the idea is that it will allow much better interactivity. It doesn't mean that that will kind of replace the use of the monitor layer. You can always have a render happening in the background and have a monitor layer on top of the delegate that you're using.
Thanks, Ariel.
Hello, this one's for me. So the question is, will we be able to expose parameters from nodes inside the shading group to the shading group itself, similar to the network material create? I don't think we'll be able to do this in scope for 4.5.5.0, but this is something that I absolutely want to do. And that requires a bit more of a conversation internally as to where we want to go with shading groups. In the presentation, I mentioned the aim for LookDev would be what we see is what we get. And for me, this sort of thing is exactly that. I would love to see shading groups becoming the container of the material. I know obviously they are currently, but for me, coming from a background of Mari, I'm very used to the material being the only place you need to go. So, you can set up the material, promote all your parameters up, and then if you're passing that on to another artist, you only have to interface with that exact top level. You never have to dive in unless you want to go in and tweak. And I would love to see this similar thing happening in Katana so that we can set up easy materials to pass on to our other artists and also to the lighting artists and save them the effort of having to dig into the individual groups. So yeah, fingers crossed. We'll see how that goes. But I hope that answers your question.
I disappeared for a second there. Thank you, Gary.
Another one here, maybe for Ariel.
Yes, amazing. Will OVP work with third-party renderer lights? So currently the delegate doesn't. What's in store for the future, I can't really say for now. So right now what it will do is it'll pick up any USD preview surface materials and display that inside the viewport. And as you can see, it gives you a really nice preview of your scenes.
I'll answer this one.
Please answer this.
Great.
So, yeah, this is essentially what Katana does. It's amazing at bringing in and handling multiple shots in an entire sequence and potentially in an entire show, all in one single template. And then when you're happy with what your settings are, you dispatch it and send it for the farm. That's what it's all about. Foresight just makes that all so much simpler for you to be able to have lots of renders going at the same time and seeing that kind of iterative process as you go along. Essentially, whatever you want to do with this particular workflow, you'll be able to get it working inside Katana. I hope that answers it for you.
Now, what's the best way to learn Mari and Katana for new starters and whether there's a free course? So just want to shout out our learn.foundry.com website. There are lots of tutorials on how to get started with Mari and Katana. And for the Mari, and there are also a lot of YouTubers out there like Stu Ainsley, Michael Wild, Chunshin, Meshman. Just name is just but a few. A lot of different channels out there with various tutorials, advanced and otherwise. And on the Katana side, Gary, Ariel, anything on the YouTube side for Katana?
Yeah, so we have the Foundry Live YouTube, Foundry Learn YouTube channel where we have regular updates of some tips and tricks, certain courses. So there's a mix of things available there. I believe there's also a few courses available elsewhere online as well. I'd have to, off the top of my head, I'd have to look more into. But maybe Gary, you would know some of the courses that are available out there.
Not off the top of my head. I know that there was a good course. I'm not sure if you just mentioned it. That the team from that we had on doing a presentation earlier on in the year. Right.
Yes. The Academy of Animated Arts.
Yes, that's the one.
We also had Tai Wong who was doing. Yeah, Tai Wong from Sony, he was doing a course on, I can't remember which. There we go. No one.
So yeah, there are definitely courses out there, and there's plenty of institutions that are actually running Katana courses now as well. That if you're fortunate enough to live in a city where you can actually go to somewhere, you can quite possibly learn it that way as well. Right. Let me see if I can find something else.
And also, we forgot to mention, Gary, there's the example projects in the Katana under help section. Let's not forget that. So those are being updated.
Why are you bringing that one up, Ariel?
Only because I'm updating them. They haven't been updated for a while. For anyone who knows about the example projects, you can find them in Katana under help example projects. And they haven't been updated in quite a long while. So there's been a bit of a passion project of mine to get those updated, and this will be a continuous effort. So I will, as soon as features are available, this will be added incrementally to the example projects that we have available in Katana.
Cool. I'll answer this one. Is there going to be material export in the USD interop? So no, for the USD interop we're currently targeting USD shade as the first phase in our interop with Katana. But material X is certainly something that we could look into the future. The way that we're developing the USD export system is completely Python driven, and we're exposing a lot of hooks in Mari's kind of core API to be able to do things in the future, like override, how geometry plugins loaded, how you can run post processes after USD files brought in. So the possibilities are kind of endless to what to build on Mari going forward. So it's definitely not something that is completely out of the question in the future. Just see what where we get to. So many questions. So the scroll bar keeps on jumping around.
I'll answer this one for Zach. A little bit more detail into reducing pipeline friction in a real life environment. So when you get involved in major studios, often certain workflows end up getting passed back to other departments, and also the communication with different departments is not always easy. So it's all about making those tools and those communication streams a lot easier. So if you imagine inside Katana, if you're using the new Nuke interop workflow, if your comper has set up a scene that is how they want to have their AOVs, how they want to have their naming scene set up, and they pass it to the lighter to use for their testing, once you've got that particular template in place, that friction and that any difficulties that might happen going between the two different departments gets ironed out. The comper already knows exactly what they're getting, and it makes that kind of workflow so much easier. And the same with other areas of the workflow as well. It's all about making that difficulty of moving between departments so much easier. USD really helps in that kind of technology as well. If you think about going from Mari to Katana with a shading setup that's been done inside Mari, if it's already been set up and done and configured and all of the materials are assigned and it's done inside USD, it will just come into Katana and just work. And that's reducing the friction that would go from going from the texturing department to Katana and setting it all up and then making sure that you have everything. And that's what it's like. There's so many points inside that pipeline whereby the moving between departments can be difficult, and it's just about making that as easy as possible. I hope that helps, Zach.
Just want to touch on this one. So would you be able to create a public interface visibility condition in Mari that can be passed to Katana? So the challenge here is that Mari's pattern engine, it all runs within Mari's kind of game engine based technology, and the only way to get that to a render engine is via a tiled map. So you'd have to flatten it, export it to files on disk, and then pass that through to the render vendor. So it's not something that can be currently run live or edited in Katana and have Mari re-flatten patterns and such at the current time. There are things that I will definitely be researching with regards to plugins with certain render vendors where you don't have to use a file. You can potentially use a custom plugin to talk to, say, Mari's flattened tile data. But these are things I'm going to be researching in future, see if we can bring the render vendor's engine closer to Mari's texture cache data.
Hey, David, this is almost like a perfect setup for us to point you towards the polls that we have on the sign tab. So what workflows you'd like to be able to do, how you would like to use the Katana to Nuke bridge. Would you like to be able to, inside Katana, do what you've seen today and more with regards to starting up Nuke while you're inside Katana and tweak a Nuke comp while you're inside Katana? Or do you want to go the other way? Do you want to have Nuke open? Do you want to be able to tweak your AOVs that you have that have been sent to you from Katana and push those changes back to Katana? We'd love to hear your answers to that in the poll question. So that many more are available there. So give us your answer to that, and we look forward to hearing it. We haven't ruled any of that out. It's all possibilities, and it's a really exciting kind of roadway that we have available to us now, and it's just which way we want to go, and that's why we're soliciting feedback. So thank you very much for asking the question. It's a great opportunity for us to get that kind of information from you on how you'd like to be able to do it.
I just also want to say that for any feature requests, we can also contact support, support.foundry.com, which I think Charlie's also set up a link for in our chat.
Here's the beginning question for you, Gary.
Wow, thank you very much, Rory. So someone coming from Maya, how similar is it to learning Katana for lighting? I think you'll find that it's a little bit different because it's node-based. So if you're familiar with a node-based application, moving to Katana is probably a little bit easier than it is from moving from Maya. But once you get there, once you get past the learning curve through all of those resources that we shared earlier on, Foundry Learn, the various courses that are online, Ariel's soon to be updated example projects. Once you've gone through those and you're actually up to speed with Katana, doing things like lighting and look dev in an application that is specific for lighting and look dev will suddenly feel seamless, especially when you start bringing in the powerful workflows when you want to do this across multiple shots or build reusable elements to your workflow. Once you've done that, suddenly lighting becomes a breeze. It's the idea of having this template, this repeatable recipe inside Katana. So if you've done it once, suddenly when you start using it for your next shot or your next couple of shots, you can do it very quickly and very easily again. And that's what it's all about inside Katana, building up this repeatable set of workflows and just streamlining the whole procedural nature of doing your lighting. You might have a little bit of a bump in that first startup, but after that, it's totally worth it. And that's why it's used on so many studios and in so many films, just because of that kind of repeatability. Cool. I hope that helps.
I think that's true for learning Katana in general as well, especially if you're used to node-based workflows, then it becomes very, very quickly, very intuitive.
Here's one for you to...
I think I beat you to it. Sorry, too quick, Rory. Can the integration or addition of third-party renderers be made easier in Katana future versions? I'd be curious to know if you've tried integrating one, Suraj, on just how difficult it is for you. It's actually, I believe, one from speaking to certain render partners, I won't mention any names. Apparently, it's a very easy third-party render plugin system to be able to get up to speed with Katana. There's always the possibility at some point in the future that we may fully adopt something like a hydra-based framework. So if you have a renderer that is hydra compliant, you'd just be able to plug it in there. That's not the case right now. Our rendering API is a bit more mature than where hydra is right now as a full-on rendering system. But never say never on that particular front. But try it, and if you encounter any problems, let us know. We'd love to hear your feedback on actually integrating a render into Katana. And thanks for the question. Back to you, Rory. What were you going to say?
It was an opportunity for you to shout about Foresight Plus.
Always happy to shout about Foresight Plus. So you're saying we can work and preview many, many shots of a sequence and send them to a final render altogether. This is a huge time saver. Yes, it is. Now my artists can work on sequences instead of interval shots. Thanks. Yes, you can. And that's kind of the point. It's all about... I think the traditional workflow of using Katana was you would have an entire sequence or even entire show in one of your templates. You would pick a key shot or some area that you would do your lighting on. You would work on it during the day, and then sometime overnight, you would put things on the farm and see what it looked like the next day. Now with Foresight Plus, if you have the resources available to you, you can work on as many of those shots as you like, get full confidence that the lighting that you're doing with that one key shot works across the entire sequence, and then you're actually ready to go, and you're not getting that first look of those other shots in the next day in your daily session. You'll be able to see exactly that, iterate on all of those shots at the same time, and that will be a big time saver for so many people. So yeah, I'm glad that you're as excited about it as we are.
I think that may be all we have time for today. Any last questions that you guys spotted you want to answer?
It's not a question, but thank you. It
seems like a great way to...
Would it be a nice end? Thank you so much.
For it. Thank you very much for your feedback. I think that was
absolute pleasure. Absolutely, from David.
Thanks everyone for joining us. Really glad that everything we've done seems to be getting a great reception, and we look forward to getting it out into the wild and getting it into your hands, getting your feedback, and hopefully having another call next year where you're all just as excited about the features as you were about these ones. So thank you all very much.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Have a lovely day, evening, everything.